Right, the only one of the ingredients that you can do anything about is your behaviors. And this is the punchline. This is the piece we're going to work on here for a few minutes. What we're looking for here, here's a continuum. On one end, and this might be a page back, I can't remember where we put this in there, but on one end of the spectrum, we have managers who exaggerate their power differential, which creates a dynamic wherein they're unapproachable. They're a little scary. They're not hearing information. There's much too much distance. There's not enough safety. On the other end of the spectrum, we have managers who tend to try to eliminate the power differential. And this can happen quite frequently with new supervisors, especially a person who's moved into a management role and is now managing people that they used to be peers with. It's really easy to make this mistake. Both of these mistakes are trouble, and we'll dig into that. What we're looking for is this place that we call mitigation, where we mitigate the power differential. We're not going to eliminate it. That's a mistake, because we actually need to use it. It is part of our management tool belt in a sense. We need to make decisions. We need to be directive. We need to give expectations. We need to hold people accountable. We're going to use our power differential for sure. But we don't want to exaggerate it because that gets in the way. So I'm going to ask you some questions at your table. First question is, and we're going to start with the exaggeration. At your table, I want you to list some behaviors that a manager might engage in. Actually, I have the question right up here, I think. No, you didn't see that? Don't cheat. Behaviors that would exaggerate the power differential. What are behaviors that a manager might engage in that make it too big and cause this unapproachability? Go. All right. What do you got? And just to interrupt her opportunity to be a smart ass, I'm going to go right to Cheryl. Cheryl, what did you get? First one.
Well,
angry. Okay, that's what I was waiting for. Okay. She got the good one. So, all right, angry, aggressive behaviors. I just want to remind you, and back to sort of our evolutionary history, when you take power plus anger, you cannot avoid fight or flight. Think about that. Authority, this person who has power over me is also angry at me. Your brain can't help it, and I want to remind you about this. Your amygdala acts up, your sympathetic nervous system kicks in, you move into self-protection mode, even if that's not obvious to the other person. Again, your sympathetic nervous system sort of shuts down the part of your brain that learns and grows at that moment. It is a lose-lose for everybody when we approach a situation with anger or frustration in our voice. Now, I was teaching this with a group of crew chiefs, and these are guys that go out in the streets all day and work on poles and ditches and keep our lights on for us and do really difficult work. And one of the guys says to me, okay, are you saying that every time I talk to the crew guys, I have to be sugary and sweet and put butterflies and bunnies in my voice? And he's being all sarcastic. And we had kind of a fun relationship, so we could kind of play with this. And I go, no, I'm not saying that. I said, David, let's try something. I walked over to him and I said, I'm going to pick on you. I said, David, this is the third day in a row that you've been late to class. I need you to be on time, 8:30 every morning. Is that clear? And I walked back and I said, hey, David, did that sound like butterflies and bunnies and snowflakes? And he said, no, you scared the shit out of me. You didn't hear anger there, though, did you? What did you hear? Direct? Did you hear firm?
Yeah, assertive.
Assertive, firm? Yeah, absolutely. Now, if you heard anger, that's transference. That's transference, right? Okay, and so I want to get my point being, you don't have to be soft and butterflies all the time, but the closest you should ever get is about what I just did to the other end of the spectrum. I mean, like that in of itself has to be reserved for a pretty important conversation. When we talk about conversations on day 3, we're going to talk about progressive conversations. There's a time and a place for that conversation, but it's not in the first couple conversations, unless it was a specific type of behavior. So, all right? So what else do you got? What else would be examples of exaggerating the power differential?
Authoritarianism.
What's the behavior behind that?
Tutorial. You will do this.
You will do this.
Do that.
Okay.
I must have this.
I must. It's a lot of those, and those aren't hyperbolic words, but they're very, what's the word for must and you will? There's
Imperative.
Imperatives, that's the word I was looking for. Very strong imperatives. Now again, if it's necessary, there's nothing wrong with that if you have to access that, but that's not your normal everyday conversation by any means. What else?
Using I, me words instead of we and you.
Lots of I and me instead of us and we, right? Now on the other hand, I will take that one and say you could also err toward the elimination side. Sometimes it's not the time and the place to say, okay guys, we really need to get this done, when you meant what? I need you to get this right. I mean, sometimes we're actually unclear in our directives because we use we and we don't mean we. On the other hand, if we talk about I and me all the time, you're putting the spotlight, which I think is what you're getting to, on yourself. What else? Other behaviors that would exaggerate the power differential. Back here.
Taking credit for other people's work.
Yeah, taking credit for others' work, but then making sure you give blame when they make a mistake. Right? So that's another concept right in here is blaming. Shaming is another closely linked cousin. Blaming and shaming. What else?
We've talked about physical, like proximity, like your boss putting, well, because we don't really have offices here, so putting yourself in like a focus room all day or just like not being physically available to your team.
Yeah, actually that reminds me of a couple things. Well, let's start with that one. How about just not being available?
Yeah.
Being distant, removed, not doing what we call MBWA. Anyone know that acronym?
Management by walking.
Management by walking around, being present, right? When you said physical, I thought of something else. How about just in confrontation being physically big, right? Or taller, meaning you sit, I'll stand. I'm not even kidding, but there's a guy downtown who said his last job, his boss in his boss's office had the boss's desk, the boss's chair. The only other place to sit in the office was a beanbag chair. Like you literally were like this, talking to your boss the entire time. Yes, sir. What else? Yeah, a little stool with a dunce cap, with a little dunce cap. Yeah. All right. What other behaviors can you think of?
I said resistance to feedback, like
Yes.
them always saying that this is the way it needs to be done. Or
Yeah, in fact, 2 directions that Kim just got to. One would be not being open to others' input. This is the way we're doing it. Now, you're going to learn on day 4, there's a time and a place for that. We call that a style 1 decision. There's a time and a place for that. But you also have to use style 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. We're going to talk through those on day 4. So not being open to other people's input. How about just kind of a related issue? We talked about this already, just being defensive. You take power plus defensiveness, right? Unapproachability. So being defensive about feedback is going to be a sure way to exaggerate your power differential. Because what you're saying is, you have no right to give me feedback. You're accentuating your power there. What else?
Arrogance?
Arrogance. Give me a...
Well, just feeling like you're God's gift to the office. And
Okay.
Everybody else needs to just pay attention to you.
And that would show up in what ways? Maybe using too much airtime?
Yeah.
Always having the answer?
No room for debate.
No room for debate. My way or the highway. I'm the smartest guy in the room. That, again, that's going to often be, in fact, you could even just separate out airtime. Airtime is a commodity. And you will find, mentioned this morning, right? Higher you go up, more rules you break. Airtime is a really easy one for people to break when they get higher in an organization.
I've seen as a category of that, and actually of that one, is like sarcasm, or people that tell some people like this. That it's like it's a way that I think people project they're angry, but they think they're being, so it's kind of
Yes.
intelligent sarcasm. But
Yes.
It's almost more cutting sometimes.
It's passive aggressive. It's, yeah. Okay, guys, apparently, if you start the word apparently, you know you're about to get into a sarcastic, passive aggressive. Apparently you didn't get the memo All right. Yeah, with all due respect, I love that one. With all due respect, I'm about to say something disrespectful right now. All right, a couple more.
Absence of empathy.
Yeah, just I don't really care. It's all about business. Let's see what else we got up here. Overreacting. You become this sort of hot stove when people know that they're going to get a bigger response than what is called for. And that's announcing your power differential. I'm the boss. Yes, I know. You don't need to keep saying that. Telling people what they're supposed to feel or think. I'm just going to throw these up there. You don't necessarily need to write all these down. Interrupting, lecturing. That's the talking at or the talking over, right? So there's the lecturing. You just need to shut up now while I do a 5-minute monologue. And I'm also going to interrupt you. Remember we said this morning, the third time in a conversation, the message is, I'm more important than you. That's what interrupting says. So there's an obvious way of exaggerating that power differential. We talked about airtime already. We talked about sarcasm. How about the overfunctioning? Only I can fix this. Right? Yeah, I know. It needs to be done right. And the only one who can do it right is me. Right? Micromanaging, there's a clear power issue right there. Right? I'm going to dictate your every move. I'll just throw these up here. Shaming, sharing your opinion first. I heard a manager, this was years ago, and they were doing a consensus decision. He goes, we're doing consensus on this. Here's what I think we should do. Oh, okay, guess what they ended up doing? You know, big surprise. Defensiveness. All right. Second question. What might a manager do, and this is not necessarily in order of your book, so you might have to kind of move around here. What behaviors run the risk of eliminating the power differential? And then what are the results of that? So what might a manager do that tries to eliminate the power differential, and how might that impact people? Talk about that for just a couple minutes. This one's a tough one, so let's take a few minutes on it. And I don't have content up here for you in this one, so let's talk this through. What are things a manager might do that eliminate or attempt to eliminate that power differential?
Best friends?
This is an interesting piece. Let's talk about friendship. I'm going to give you a little bit of philosophy on this. You may or may not agree, but I'm right. So, did we mention arrogance? I mentioned arrogance earlier. So here we are. No. So I actually do not believe in this. There is one philosophy that says you are not allowed to be actual friends with your employees. I don't agree with that. Although I'm going to give you a lot of caveats here on this one, right? But I don't agree with it. I don't agree that you can't be friends outside of work with your employees. But I will say this, unless you're able to walk a really fine line, you might not want to do it. I'm not saying don't, I'm just saying if you're going to do it, there's some really fine lines you have to walk, right? So let's talk about some of those fine lines. What do we need to be careful about when we're friends with someone who we also supervise?
Making them favorites.
The appearance of favoritism, let's start with that one. And by the way, we'll talk about this later, it's actually really easy to accidentally slip into this. For example, here's a bottom line for you guys. If you are friends with someone outside of work, it should not show up at work. That means you're not sitting around in public talking about the game you went to on the weekend, because your other employees are hearing that. And they can't help but go into that mode of, oh, that person has a special in because he drinks beer with the boss on weekends. Right? You do get to advertise. I'm not saying you have to pretend it doesn't exist, but there should be no appearance of that friendship at work. Does that make sense? You're not just not flaunting it. It should be gone. There should be no way that an outside observer could come in and watch you throughout the day and see that you are friends with that person outside of work. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. That's a really firm rule. And I know it sounds really firm, and I mean it that way, because I've seen way too many situations where that alone starts the impression of favoritism, and it's really hard to unwind that one. So there's a fine line, watching out for that. What else? Fine lines around friendship. Any other ideas on
Talking to them about
Yes.
off-limit topics?
Yes.
Yeah.
The rules change when you become someone's supervisor. You can still be their friend, but there's certain things you're not going to talk about. Okay, for example, you are not going to badmouth this company or anyone else in the company to that person, right? And I'm going to show you why that matters. Let me grab a chart here. In systems theory and systems thinking, I'm going to talk to you about a family really quick here. This circle represents a family system. And in this family system, we're going to put two subsystems. The family system itself has a parental subsystem. So this family has two parents, which creates its own subsystem. And they have 3 kids, and we're going to call this the sibling subsystem. One of the unhealthy things that can happen in a family is where you take a child and you move them temporarily into this subsystem, and that's called the parentified child. And there's a lot of ways we do it inadvertently. Sometimes it's pretty unhealthy and bad. Sometimes it's almost accidental. But here's one of the ways it happens. I'm ticked off at my wife, and I talk about that with my son. For a kid who's still living in the home, I mean, I'm talking not an adult, but for a kid who's underage living in my home, that's a parentified child. And when you parentify a child, here's what happens. Not only does it actually impact that kid psychologically in a negative way, in a weird, almost magic way, it impacts everybody down here. It creates messy systems when you parentify a child. And this happens, by the way, and I'm not just talking about friendships now. Let's expand on this. Anytime you guys badmouth another manager in this organization to employees, you're actually causing morale problems. Y'all hear that? So this is not a shame thing. I want you to just ask yourself, do you find yourself venting and triangulating and saying bad things about other managers to other people in this organization? Like it or not, there's some damage going on right there. Does that make sense to everybody? So one of the ways this could show up is in this elimination of the power differential, where I have this friend, and so when we're not at work, I say things to that person about other people at work in a negative way. That's off limits. Yes, you're friends, but by the way, is it okay to have a friendship and have some off-limit topics? Yes, yes, and if you can't do that, go back to rule number 1. Don't have friendships with people that you supervise. If you can't have a friendship and have some off-limit conversations, I mean, obviously the confidential stuff, that's a given, right? There's probably going to be some of those things anyways, confidential, but also your angst about others in the organization, your angst about the company, that's not okay for the boss to be sharing those things with an employee, even if you're friends. Does that ring true for everybody? I hope that's helpful. There's some guidelines there, right? What else? Anything else you can think of that would be things to watch out for if you're friends with someone outside of work?
I think overcompensating. Like,
how's that?
you can actually end up being harder on them because you're trying.
Yes. I don't want to look like I'm your friend, so watch out, dude. Yeah. You're going to get all the worst jobs. Yeah. Right. So yeah, I think that's really important to watch out for that. We don't want to overcompensate either out of fear of looking like you're showing favoritism. Anything else in general? Eliminating the power differential.
It makes like swim lanes a little messy, like who's calling the shots. If you're kind of eliminating that and you're really close friends with them,
Yep.
it makes things a little complicated.
As far as who actually is making the decision.
Who's accountable?
Yeah. In fact, let's go a step further. One of the ways that we inadvertently try to eliminate the power differential, how about not holding people accountable? Not giving feedback? Not calling people on their behaviors, right? Again, that's really hard if you've been supervising people, peers with people, and then supervising them. That you can see why that's the position where it's really easy to slip into this elimination kind of behavior. I was peers with you last week, and now I'm the person who has to give you feedback about your performance. That's weird, really. It's a really sudden adjustment. There's work to do about that. We don't have time in this workshop, but we do have a workshop on going from peer to boss, because there's actually some steps you want to take to make that a little more smooth. Anything else?
You talked about if you get in a situation where the power differential has been eliminated and then something bad happens, like maybe
Yes.
you've been able to coast
Yes.
in that way and then something bad happens, you really can't.
All of a sudden, you're going to use your power differential that you've pretended wasn't there. Yeah, it's way too stark of a switch. Yeah, switching gears is really difficult at that point.
Kind of the opposite of micromanagement, allowing people too much freedom.
Yep. Yeah, I'm not going to tell you what to do. Right? It's not my place to tell you what to do. Right? And then you're not doing quality control suddenly. Right? Good. Last call. Anything else? Things a manager might do that runs the risk of eliminating the power differential?
Not giving performance feedback.
Not what?
Giving performance.
Yeah, not giving performance feedback, not holding them accountable, not being directive, being unwilling, even on this micro level, let's say during a meeting, being unwilling to say, oh, hold on a second, let her finish her thought, right? Isn't part of leading a good meeting air traffic controlling? That's facilitating a meeting is hard. So we're talking even on that micro level. There is authority. As managers, we have to have authority. We have to exercise the authority we actually have. In fact, know this, I'm sure you're aware of this. Your other employees are wishing you would do it if you're not. Right? If you're one of those managers who's not exercising any of your power differential, I will tell you from thousands of interviews, employees are wishing you would. All right, last question at your table. What are the behaviors that a manager could engage in now that would mitigate their power differential? Take a few minutes on that. What behaviors are going to mitigate?
Encouraging feedback.
Oh man, asking for feedback. I mean, what you're going to see up here is not just be open to feedback, right, non-defensive, but go get it. And we're going to be talking about that later today, seeking out feedback. What better way can you say that it's safe to give me feedback than to actually asking for the feedback? Good. What did you say over here?
Consensus building, asking
Yeah.
people what they think.
Yeah, and you're going to hear me be a little careful with the wording on day 4. I'm not going to call it consensus building, and you'll see why on day 4. But being open to others' feedback, asking for others' feedback, input before you decide something, right? Now remember, asking for people's input is not the same thing as consensus. It's very different. And consensus is a very valid way to decide, and that's one of the 6 ways of deciding. But there's a couple other ways of deciding that are awesome where you don't need consensus, but you still are seeking input, and you're using that input as data as you then make a decision. Good. What else? Yeah, the word power is right in there. Empower others, right? Which means give areas of control. Give them areas that are theirs. You're going to give people areas where they can just decide and they don't even have to report to you. You're going to give them areas where they can just decide, but you want them to FYI you afterwards. Right? There's a couple, 3 or 4 different ways to do this, right?
And on the flip side, if there's a more sticky situation that you don't want them to have to handle, you're kind of using that power authority in a positive way to take that on your plate and
Yes.
figure it out.
Yeah, exactly. You're not just dumping it on them and saying, well, good luck. Right? You're using your authority to actually partner with them. And so when things don't go perfectly well, you're going to share the credit and take the blame, right? Yep. Share the credit and take the blame. Good. What else?
Be clear and direct in your expectations.
Be clear about your expectations. Now that could actually exaggerate, but it doesn't need to, right? Here's the thing. When you're clear and direct about your expectations, you don't have to micromanage as much, right? And that's actually one of the reasons that managers end up micromanaging was because they weren't clear in the first place. So you actually can help the mitigation by being clear because now you can give autonomy, or at least some sort of autonomy. Good. Couple more. What else?
Making time to talk.
Yes. Yeah. Be available. Spend time with your people. How about stay calm? Practice emotional consistency. This is the opposite of have you ever had that boss where you kind of have to take their temperature every day to see which boss you're getting? Right? And by the way, if you have an employee who grew up in an environment where they really did have inconsistencies coming from the parents, emotional inconsistency, it's frightening to also have a boss who you can't really predict because they're going to be going off on other days and be calm on other days. So this emotional consistency. What else? Anything else on your list?
Be flexible.
Flexible. Allow some flexibility. Yep. How about the basics? Be relational.
Be available.
Check in. Show up. Management by walking around. Just being a human being with that other human being. Right? Connecting. And you know all this. That's one I think we tend to do intuitively. We already have non-defensive and listening because we focused on those a lot today already. But those, as we've said this morning several times, are both really important for this connection piece and for mitigating the power differential. How about have some fun? Right? And you guys are good at that here. Have some fun. Appreciations, right? Affirmations. There is a basic behavior style, which you'll talk about next time. There's about a quarter of the population struggles with the, hey honey, I told you I loved you when I married you. I'll let you know if I change my mind. Do we need to keep rehashing this kind of thing, right? Meaning there is a certain behavior style that has a hard time giving compliments. They have a hard time catching people doing it right and mentioning that. And that is what a powerful way to build trust and to, again, mitigate your power differential. There's the take blame and give credit. There's the asking for opinions. There's the empowering. You got all these. How about sharing information? Not holding it close to your chest. Humility, right? This is an interesting concept, right? When you first hear the word humility, as far as an adaptive skill, doesn't that seem very internal? Right? It's a very internal thing, but it's not, is it? Just an internal thing. Give me some phrases that my manager might use that demonstrate humility. What's a humble phrase?
I didn't know that.
Very good. I didn't know that. Thank you for sharing that with me or teaching me that. I didn't know that. What's another humble phrase? It's a really hard one. I'll give you a hint. I was wrong. And here's the worst one. And I'm sorry. Okay, those are hard, right? But there's humility right there, right? Hey, I was wrong. My bad. I shouldn't have done it that way. Admitting that to your people, right? I wished I would have thought about that more. I wished I would have asked your guys' opinion. I was wrong. Hey guys, I'm really sorry. I got really defensive in the meeting when you challenged me on this, right? I'm sorry. How about I don't know? How about you know better than I do about this? Can you help me with this? Now here's the thing, guys. Let's go back to our behavior, external, right? Internal. I don't care if you're the most humble person in the world. You can practice those behaviors. Let's end this section with the power differential game. It's not in your book. Quick little role play. Here we go. Power differential game. Here's how it works. You're the staff team, this employee team. I'm your boss. And let's go through the three ingredients of the power differential, right? Let's remember those again because we have all of them going on here between you and me. Okay, what's the first ingredient of the power differential? The power I have over you. So I'm a way up here boss, okay? I just happen to have a lot of power over you. I'm a director of something. All right, whatever. I'm the director of something, let's say. That's my title. All right, what's the second ingredient of the power differential? Your own transference, right? You guys all had rough childhoods, all right? Just pretend that's true. All right, you all had rough childhoods. And third ingredient of the power differential? My behaviors. Okay, here's the story. Let's pretend that I am an okay boss. I am not the worst boss you've ever had. I'm not the best boss you've ever had. I have some really good qualities, but I also struggle with a few things. For example, I do tend to get defensive when you challenge me, and you can see it on my face, you can hear it in my voice. I also can get a little shaming when you've done something that I don't like. I can do a lot of, well, why did you do that? What were you thinking when you made that decision, right? So I can do the little shaming thing sometimes too. So there's a couple behaviors that aren't, fun for you. So there's the setup. Here's the quick little game. I'm going to ask you some questions, and for you to play this game right, you need to answer my questions right. See that? Right. Answer them right. Okay, keep yourself safe. All right. Hey guys, hi. Thanks for coming to this meeting that's mandatory, but I'm going to thank you anyways for coming to it. And I just went to a seminar, and I learned some things, so I guess I need to ask, how am I doing as a manager?
Great.
Am I doing good? Do I rock? Cool, thanks you guys. How are the staff meetings going? They going okay? They're going good? All right, good. Good. Anything you need from me that you've been waiting on from me? Are we good?
No, we're good.
We're good? Awesome. Anything else you need from me? You guys, thank you for your transparency. I feel all warm and fuzzy toward you guys now. All right, good job. All right, so you played that game really well, and I did that game just before our next exercise for a couple reasons. One, I just want to three reasons. I wanted to remind you of the three ingredients, and you got them. Number two, I want you just to see the power differential in action, right? Because what you did there is what anybody would do, more or less, in a power differential situation when there's some of those behaviors. But here's the third thing. All those questions I asked you them terribly. And after a break, we're going to learn how to ask all those questions right. Because every one of those questions was asked in a way where you knew what I wanted to hear. Yeah.